Blog Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, Neye, EGUA, Medinde Ojirapo, Kwesi, Ra Nehempata Akan. HOODOO MAYN, Amaruka, Etifimu Ojirapo. That means greetings to all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning African Black people. Today is EGUA Day, Marketplace Day. My name is Ojirapo, Kwesi, Ra Nehempata Akan. Ojirapo be a Hoodoo Nation in North America. HOODOO MAYN move within the Ojira Nation, the purified nation of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say we thank you for tuning into this special broadcast of EGUA Marketplace. We typically broadcast EGUA on Afuada Wednesday nights, and we shifted to Yauda Thursday night for this particular broadcast, and we want to get into some specific information. We have 3 broadcasts on a weekly basis. On Joda on Monday night, we have Amarukafo Nanasom, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion, where we deal specifically with the Akan expression of ancestral religion. Of course, number one, because we are Akan as an organization, as a group, but specifically as well because there is misinformation being propagated regarding Akan culture and philosophy and cosmology and spirituality and so forth. So therefore, we clarify concepts, clarify philosophy, clarify the nature of the Supreme Being, the Great Mother, and the Great Father, Nyamewa, and Nyame, the nature of the Creator and Creatress, Nyokompon and Nyokonton, the nature of the Abosom, the deities, the nature of the Nananom, Nsamampo, the spiritually cultivated Ancestresses and Ancestors. So we have a number of different things that we cover on Akanto Nanasom, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion. The way the tradition is put forward very often from individuals on the continent who have been misinformed, infected by white culture, white pseudo-religion like Christianity and Islam and Judaism and Hinduism and Taoism and pseudo-New Age spirituality, occultism and so forth. They have corrupted their own traditions, and then they promote those corruptions in the form on the surface as traditional culture, traditional religion, which of course it is not. So we clarify these things. Akanto Nanasom. On Binada Abinada, we have Ojira, purification. Jira means purification. It also means a celebration of purification. That's the definition of Ojira in the Akan language. It is also the definition of Jira in the language of ancient Kanit and Kemet, Nubia and Egypt. So we show the Medutu, the hieroglyphs, spelling out the term Jira in ancient Kemet and Kanit, meaning purification and celebration of purification. Of course, Akanpo, Akan people, as well as many other groups on the continent, descend directly from ancient Kanat and Kemet, ancient Nubia and Kemet, and of course our languages are directly derived, genetic descendants of our ancient ancestral language. So of course you're going to find the same words, same concepts, same multi-tiered metaphysical and cosmological principles intact in the various languages, as well as the same names for the same divinities in our contemporary expressions of our ancestral religious practices that you find in ancient Kanat and Kemet. So when we talk about Jira purification, we're talking about the purification of our ancestral religious practice. Nanasom or Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion, no matter what expression it takes, including the expressions of our people on the continent, as well as those of us who were forced to migrate outside of the continent during the Musu of Kessie, the great perversity, the enslavement era, those who held on to our tradition in the forms of Hoodoo and Juju and Voodoo and various forms, Gullah-Geechee traditions, Gris Gris and so forth. We're the same people practicing the same traditions. Ancestral religion is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. Through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we restore balance to our lives by rejecting those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject repel, to hate, to repulse, in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and thus realign ourselves with divine order in every thought, intention, and action. So the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance are the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion, which we call Nanasom as a catch-all term for any form of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion. So on Jida or Jida Day, Benada, Abenada Tuesday nights, we deal with the purification of our ancestral religious practices, no matter what form they take, purifying the understanding of cosmology and culture and the nature and relationship of the Great Mother and Great Father, Aminet, Amen, Nyamewa, Nyame, the divinities, the ancestresses and ancestors who are cultivated of our blood circles. All of these various things we go into detail about. We read texts from ancient commandments, as well as dealing with ritual texts, oral texts, and so forth from all over the continent and wherever our people have migrated into the Western Hemisphere. So that's what we deal with on Jida. We always talk about Ojida, purification operationalizes Nanasom. Purification operationalizes our ritual practice of ritually incorporating law and ritually restoring balance. So we engage the purificatory process. We purify ourselves when we engage the process, therefore, of incorporating law and restoring balance every moment of every day, maintaining our moral foundation, maintaining our moral consciousness, our moral rectitude. So we move forth in a harmonious fashion where we're engaging life, when we're engaging the world, when we're executing our function in creation. So this is what we're dealing with on Ojida. On EGUA Marketplace Day, EGUA means marketplace, the Akan language. So we typically have businesses, organizations, and institutions that come onto the show to talk about their service to the community, serving our community in a positive capacity, and how their ancestral religious values inform their service to the community, how it informs their philosophy and therefore their service to the community. So we've had a number of individuals come on and sit with us for a couple of hours through the show to introduce themselves, introduce their services, their products and so forth, their institutions, their organizations, their businesses, and talk about their philosophy behind serving the community. In that process, we have published the Okom Economic Development Model. It is a model of economic development rooted in our ancestral religious values. So we published that model when you go to the Okom Economic Development page on our website, and we'll put the link in the chat room right quick. Okom is O-K-O-M. When you go to that page on our website, then you will see, you can download that model. You can also download the 4-part series that we did on Blog Talk, explicating the model, showing how it applies to every aspect of our lives and how it can be implemented and so forth. And you'll also see the list of businesses, organizations, and institutions, their website, links to their website, and also the links to the interviews that they did with us on the show. In the process, what we're doing with regard to Okom Economic Development, part of that model is the strategy of starve the beast and feed the pride. That means we make an assessment on a weekly basis to determine what funds we would have potentially wasted with the whites and their offspring, and then we starve the beast and feed the pride. We take the funds away from the white beast, the white business, and reallocate them to the business, organization, or institution of the week. We are targeting one business, organization, or institution per week for 52 weeks. We began that process in February. We're beyond the halfway point at this point, and you'll see that list of businesses on the page. And it's an ever-growing list. We target one per week for optimal capital infusion. Therefore, when we starve the beast and feed the pride, if one person does that and takes the $10 they would have spent at Starbucks throughout the course of the week, or Walmart or CVS, for products that we really do not need, and you starve the beast and feed the pride, you reallocate $10 away from the white businesses directly to a black business, the business of the week. When we as a community engage in that process, 1,000 people engage in that process, $1,000 reallocated from white businesses, our enemies, directly to the business, organization, or institution of the week. And of course, the $10,000 infusion of capital in the course of 1 week will allow a Black business to remain open, to expand their products and services to us so that we don't have to seek those products and services from our enemies. It also allows them to hire people immediately from the community, from within the community, so that our people can have employment. Of course, there are about 2 million Black people unemployed, according to the statistics. There are nearly 2 million Black businesses in America. If each business hired one Black person, that every Black person who's unemployed would be employed. That can take place virtually overnight when we stop spending over $950 billion with our enemies out of the $1 trillion we receive in income over the course of a year. Instead of spending 95+% of that with our enemies and only about 5% with our own, we can specifically take most of that $950 billion and direct it to these 2 million Black businesses. So we target one per week for optimal capital infusion so that our people can hire, expand their services, and so forth. If we do not engage that process, then by default, we are leaving that $10,000 in the hands of our absolute enemies, the whites and their offspring, whether they're white Arabs, white Hindus, white Americans, white Europeans, white Hispanics, white pseudo-Native Americans, white Latinos, white whoever they are. Enemies within our community, sucking the lifeblood out of the community every moment of every day. So we are financing our own oppression when we do not engage this process of starving the beast and feeding the frog. So this is what we do with the Occam economic development model. The business of the week, and it was this week as well as last week because it's a little bit different. We have a number of businesses that are connected to the specific past couple of weeks. And the reason for that is this coming Miminada, this coming Saturday, October 17th, in Washington, D.C., is our first annual HOODOO MAYN, Hoodoo Nation Festival. So at HOODOO MAYN, we will have an all-day event hosted by HOODOO MAYN, Amarukafo Nanasom in North America. We will have the event from 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. It is a free event for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, and Afuraitkaini people only. It's a free private event, family event as well, of course. We will have vendors throughout the course of the entire day. You can shop all day long. We have a live food vendors. We have people selling natural soaps, natural shea butter, cocoa butter, natural hair care and body products and so forth, handmade items, handmade cultural jewelry, carving, handmade clothing, natural clothing, cultural clothing, and so forth. We have a number of books. We have a number of different individuals who are vending at the event. When you go to the HOODOO MAYN page, you'll see the detailed information about HOODOO MAYN. You also see the itinerary for the event. You see the 6-page flyer that you can download and share. We also have a HOODOO MAYN page on Facebook. But on the regular HOODOO MAYN page on our website, you will see that information. You will also see the HOODOO MAYN Nhoma, the HOODOO MAYN journal. We just released the journal today. So you can download the ebook version of the journal. You can also order the soft cover version of the journal. The soft cover version of the journal will be given away to everyone who attends the event for free. If you cannot attend the event, of course, the soft cover journal, you can order that directly from us, and we just published that, completed the publication today. We placed the ebook version online. You can download that, and you can order the soft cover version. The soft cover version is $8. Inside the journal, of course, we have articles dealing with hoodoo in America, authentic hoodoo. We just published, as part of that journal, the spirit genetic Akan ancestral inheritance, dealing with our inheritance from ancient Kanit all the way to North America, dealing with the whole notion of the Y chromosomal haplogroup, E1B1A connected to Ramesu III, to Amen, and these, different ancestors in ancient Kemet, showing that migratory pattern of that Y chromosomal haplogroup, genetic-wise, to West Afuraitkaitnut, clustering in the western part of the continent, and then coming into North America during the Musuo Kesie, the Great Diversity, the enslavement era, and being found in 50 to 75% of all Afuraitkaitnut people in America. So we just published that article as part of the book. There are a couple of other articles there as well, plus the list of all of the vendors who will be at the event. So you can go look into the book and you will see all of the vendors who will be there. You will see the ads for their information, what they will be selling on Memenida on Saturday. And then we also have other businesses, organizations, and institutions who will not be in the city, but they took out ads in the journal, and you can access their information as well, dealing with natural health and naturopathic medicine, clothing, cultural clothing like Pan-African Designs, a number of different businesses, organizations, and institutions. UBEN House, owned by Mwalimu Baruti and Enaya Baruti and so forth. All of these individuals, institutions, organizations, businesses have come onto the EGUA Marketplace show in the past. So you can not only see their information in the journal, you can go to the website, you can click on their links to their interviews and so forth, as we said. So, but you can access that journal. We just published that today. All right. So that's what we're doing with EGUA Marketplace Day. So we typically have that broadcast on Awukuda, Afuada Wednesdays. We shifted it to today, Yauda, Thursday. We want to talk about EGUA Marketplace, but also in the context of the HOODOO MAYN, Hoodoo Nation Festival, which that in itself in a larger context. And the larger context is the title of the show. And this is why we wanted to do it on Yauda, because of the energy that governs Yauda. The title of the show is UBEN, the Rise of Amarukafo Nanasom, quote unquote, African American Ancestral Religion. So when we talked about Nanasom, we're talking about Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African Black Ancestral Religion, no matter where we exist on earth for thousands of years. Some of us, of course, were forced into the Western Hemisphere during the Musuo Kesie, which is an Akan term for the Great Kesie Musuo perversity, which is the enslavement era, the great evil, the great perversity, and so forth. So during the Musuo Kesie, the great perversity, the enslavement era, some of us were forced to migrate into North, Central, South America, and the Caribbean, as well as Europe. Of course, those of our people, as we have taught and continue to teach through our publications and so forth, including our book, Hoodoo People, those who held on to our ancestral religious traditions are those who waged war against the whites and their offspring, who are motivated, empowered, and guided to wage war effectively against the whites and their offspring, massacre the whites and their offspring consistently and incessantly, and force the whites and their offspring into long wars, eventually the Gullah Wars, eventually even leading into the Civil War, which was spurred by the Gullah Wars and previous insurrections and so forth. And we forced abolition and forced emancipation. If it was not for our people waging war militarily against the whites and their offspring, powered by the Abosom, the Orisha, the Voodoo, guided by the Nananum, Nsamanfo, the Egungun, the Kubito, and so forth, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our blood circles, the whites and their offspring would have gladly continued enslaved. We would still be enslaved right now, even if they would have changed the economic model to a certain extent or changed the political model to a certain extent. If we would have acquiesced and continued to serve them, they would have gladly continued that process. But because we began to massacre them, because we were empowered by our ancestral religious practices, they were forced to accept abolition and emancipation, and then they began another process. They decided, well, we can't continue to enslave them physically, so we're going to move to teach them Christianity and work to enslave the minds of the people. And it took them nearly 100 years to get our people on board with that nonsense into the so-called 1900s. So, but the key is, we held on to our ancestral traditions that led to the defeat of slavery. Now, what we're talking about, the restoration of hoodoo and Juju and Voodoo and Gris Gris and Gullah-Geechee traditions and various forms of ancestral religion, amongst Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people in America bespeaks a unique approach to ancestral religion based upon our ancestral blood circle, the direct blood ancestresses and ancestors, as well as our interfacing with this region of Asaase Afua, the Earth Mother. So the term for Earth in our Khan culture is Asaase. We have Asaase Afua, the fertile Earth Mother, Asaase Ya, the barren, quote unquote, for hard, protective Earth Mother. So when we interface with this region of the Earth Mother divinity, then there's a different manner in which we operate. It's slightly different, it's slightly varied, but it's still on track with what we've been doing for thousands of years. But we adjust based on this region and the energy of this region. It's no different than physically maintaining your health, maintaining your equilibrium, maintaining your equilibrated life force energy. With regards to simply the weather, if you're living in Afuraitkaitnut in a tropical region and it averages around 70 degrees year-round or 75 degrees year-round in a certain area, when you're forced to migrate into the Western Hemisphere or someone from there migrates over here, weather-wise, and they move to a place like Chicago, New York, or Minnesota or something like that, then during the summertime, if they moved and it's 75 and 80 degrees, it's just like it was when they were at home, and there's no problem. Then all of a sudden, as the months go by, then all of a sudden something happens that has never happened to them before in their existence. The temperature begins to drop, and then it begins to snow, and it's something they've never seen and experienced, and they've never experienced cold before. They've never experienced 30-degree weather before. That lasts for months. So they have to change the way they operate because they're interfacing with a different region of the Earth Mother. If they do not harmonize with that and learn how to keep themselves warm and maintain their normal body temperature, then they will suffer disease and ultimately death. But if they learn how to adapt to this region of the Earth Mother, we're not talking about the political structure, the governmental structure, or the culture or the society of this region. We're talking specifically about this region of the Earth Mother when we walk on her body and align ourselves with the energy of this region. We make adjustments based on that reality. When we eat food that is grown naturally in this region and it becomes part of all of the cells in our body, including our sperm and ovum cells, that affect our energetic output slightly, and then we resonate differently, especially when the abosome of the region possess our people and transform our blood circle, transform our DNA, then we become indigenized to the land. We did an entire broadcast on how the nature of indigenization that was part of the OCOM Economic Development Model Series. When we talk about indigenization, the only people who are indigenous anywhere in the world are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people. These migrant Asians who have migrated and invaded the Western Hemisphere, erroneously referring to themselves as Native American and not indigenous anywhere at all. They are invaders and criminals, and they are not the first people, and they are not our people at all. Whether it's Mexican, any other form of Hispanic, we have black people who are Hispanic because they were forced to speak Spanish, or black who call themselves Latino because they were forced to speak Spanish, just like some of our people were forced to speak English. But are we really English? No. Are they really Hispanics or really Latinos? Absolutely not. They're Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people who were forced to speak those languages. So some of our people were forced to speak French in Haiti and so forth. But they're still our people. But we're not talking about those people. We're talking about these criminal white and their offspring, these white Asians, white Europeans, these white Eurasians who speak Spanish and so forth and call themselves Native Americans, who call themselves Latinos and Hispanics and so forth. These are our same enemies who have been our enemies for thousands of years. They are not our brothers and sisters. There's no union of the black and brown. That's foolishness. So, when we're talking about interfacing with this region of the Earth Mother as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, and when we connect with the abosome, the forces of nature that animate the rivers, this region of the Earth Mother, plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth, and they possess our people, and we interface with them, and of course, only Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, African people, black people can be possessed by the forces of nature, the spirits of order. They do not possess Asians or pseudo-Native Americans or the whites and their offspring on any level. So when the forces that animate creation possess our people and transform our DNA, transform our energy, and then we give birth and copulate and conceive children, then those children's bodies literally are resonating at the frequency of this region of the Earth Mother, and they become indigenized because the abosom of the region energy is moving through their blood. So that's how we become indigenized. And Black people are the only people who can become indigenized. We migrated from Afuraitkaitnut and settled in different parts of the world tens of thousands of years ago. We did not originate in America or ancient America. We migrated from Afuraitkaitnut and settled in America, and then we indigenized ourselves, but we still ultimately are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. So when we talk about that kind of information, we're talking about interfacing with this region of the Earth Mother, we manifest a specific or unique expression of Nanasom, of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit Ancestral Religion. So we call that Amarukafo Nanasom, or quote unquote, if you say it in English, African American Ancestral Religion. So first we're going to deal with specifically, we're going to deal with this whole notion of the term America, and we're going to post the information from our book, Afuraitkaitnut, The Origin of the Term Africa. And we're going to tie that information in with this notion of UBEN, which we will read from our UBEN Shang, the Ancestral Summons. We'll put the link to the chat to that particular book. This is one of our 17 books. We now have 17 books as of today because we published the 17th book, the HOODOO MAYN, Nhoma, the HOODOO MAYN Journal. Today, we published that today, so that makes book number 17. UBEN Shang and Afuraitkaitnut are two of those books, and we're putting the links in the chat room right now. All right. So when you talk about the term UBEN, and why do we use that term for the show? And then we're going to get into this, the details about the origin of the term America so we can understand what we're talking about. UBEN is a term in ancient Kemet and Kanat, meaning when you look at the Medut, when you look at the hieroglyph and you see the sun and you see the rays coming from the sun and so forth, it's talking about to rise and so forth, but it's also talking about bright, brilliant, drawing forth by illumination, shining and so forth. Shang means the same thing. It means that in ancient Kemet, but it also means the same thing in the Akan language. And when you look at UBEN, it actually means the same thing in both languages, that the disk of the sun, sometimes shining, sometimes taking on that reddish tint. Sometimes when the sun is rising, you see the atmosphere around the horizon become reddish, and then the sun rises. And of course, when they show the abosom, the female divinity, Nut, bent over through the sky, bent over the earth, and her whole body is the sky, and the stars are in her body and so forth. And she swallows the Aten, swallows the sun at night, and then gives birth to the Aten, gives birth to the sun in the morning on the horizon. So when the sun comes out of the womb of the great mother Nut, then sometimes you see the sky take a pinkish or reddish tint as the sun is about to rise and so forth. And they will say that, you know, when a child is born, then of course blood is associated with that birth, that childbirth. So when that sky becomes red, that's Nut, the blood of life, the blood of giving birth to the child is manifesting in the quote-unquote sky in the region where the sun is being born. Sometimes you see the sun with that reddish tint and so forth. Ben in Akan, Ben or Bere means red. Ben means to become red by boiling. Ben means thoroughly fired and so forth. So UBEN meaning shining bright, the rising of the sun, the reddish sun disk as it's painted in ancient Kemet. UBEN is all connected, dealing with that fire, that rising, that illumination, and so forth. UBEN Shang, the name of our publication, is the combination, as we say, of the Kanitu, Kamal, so-called Nubian Egyptian term UBEN, the Sri Akan term Shang. The terms are defined in their respective languages as descriptive of drawing forth by illumination to shine, bright, brilliant. As a name, they are representative of the revivifying energy of creative power. Just as the morning sun calls for the rejuvenation of earth, UBEN Shang is a summons for the rejuvenation of the culture. UBEN Shang, the Ancestral Summons, is the name of the publication. And what we say when we talk about the UBEN Shang, this is information our Nananom, Nsamanfo, and the Abosom gave to us to write. And we checked with them on every subject, every piece of it, divined with regard to this information, make sure we got the information correct, that they were feeding us. And then once we did the divination and everything was sound, then we will publish the particular piece and go to the next piece until the whole book was done. Sometimes we put the information, we write out the information, do the divination. The information wasn't totally correct. We go back and do edits, do the divination again. Then the Abosom would say, and the Nsamanfo would say that this was correct, and then it was cleared, and we would go to the next piece. So this is how this particular book unfolds, which is different from the other publications. All of our publications are, of course, sanctioned by the Abosom and Nsamanfo. This specific one, the information was given by them first, and we simply took the information down and made sure we had it correct. So when you look at it, it's the Nsamanfo speaking to us, the Nananom Nsamanfo speaking to us. And when you look at the first piece, this is what we'll focus on this particular aspect, because this is the title of the show tonight. What it says and what they say to us is, quote, "You will come to recognize that whatever is done above is also done below. Whatever functions are executed in the spirit realm will be replicated in the physical realm. This is law. Those who lived before you have left their genetic imprint in you. Your physical body shows their genetic qualities. Your behavior is reflective of these qualities. Who are you descended of essentially? Should you not then show the qualities and consciously engage in behavior, which is reflective of your progenitress, the great ancestral spirit, which is Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress. This is culture, the embracing of harmony. The way is then open to union. Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut are the heiresses of spirit, of Ra and Ra'et, Nyonkumpon and Nyonkunton. Thus your inheritance is that of the law and culture of the Supreme Being. You will die only when the Supreme Being dies. And that is Akan Ebe, showing that we are immortal in spirit. The spirit never died. The Krawa never died. So that is the backdrop, the foundational principle of this UBEN Shang Ancestral Summit. Talking about our genetic imprint shows the specific qualities, and qualities within us genetically also reflects our behavior. Spiritually, we're a descendant, and our behavior, our disposition, our spiritual makeup is reflective of Ra and Ra'et. This is why we're called Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut. It's reflective of the great creator and creatress, but also the specific Abosom and the Nananom Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our direct blood circle. When we connect with them, as they have connected with the Earth Mother, no matter what region of the Earth Mother we come in contact with, then we reflect that interaction. The Abosom of a river in the Western Hemisphere that has been animating that river for thousands of years, or an Abosom that's been animating a mountainous region, or a plains region, or a wooded, forested region, and so forth, possesses one of our people and floods them with that energy and teaches them the so-called secrets or the wisdom within the forest, within the plant life and animal life and mineral life within the forest. And we learn how to extract medicines from this particular plant life and mineral life that we had never seen before, because we had never interfaced with these kinds of plants and these kinds of minerals or even the animals in this region, taking on new achenebois, new animal totems, because we're in a region where different animals exist, but of course they are spirits their spirits were placed in them by Ra and Ra'et, so they have a divine function as well. So when we come to learn and interact and interface and connect with the forces of nature in this region and align with them, we develop a specific expression of Nanasom. Our expression of our practice of ancestral religion will be slightly different than it is on the continent, based on our experience with this region of Asaase Afua and all that entails. So we still are fundamentally the same, but we have a slight change, slight difference. No different than someone migrating from the continent here. They're still from the same blood circle as their family on the continent, but during certain times of the year, they put on more clothes, where the people on the continent are not engaging in that kind of cultural behavior. Things are done differently because they're in a different region of the Earth Mother, and the same is true spiritually. But the fundamental principles are the same. So let's first go to Afuraitkaitnut, the origin of the term Africa. We want to get to section 3, part 3, and bring out some information about the term. America, as a matter of fact. If you look on page 34 of our book, Afuraitkaitnut, the origin of the term Africa. Under the section Aw Inka and Amen Ra Ka. It says in the papyrus text, very often called the Tale of the Shipwrecked Sailor from ancient Kemet, written approximately 4,000 years ago. Very famous text. You can Google Tale of the Shipwrecked Sailor, and you'll find it all over the internet, translated by many people. Written approximately 4,000 years ago, we have another reference to a divine raised land called Ka. So when we talk about Afuraitkaitnut in this book, we are the first, of course, of any scholar, black, white, or whatever, to prove that the term Africa comes from Afuraka, and we prove that that term is found in the Medutu, in the hieroglyphs. We show the actual hieroglyphs, and also in the context of the cosmology, where you find those hieroglyphs defining that term. We show that in the papyrus of Hunefer, the papyrus of Ani, and the temple of Al-Set in Paraka, so-called Philae. We're talking about the Ka, the raised land, the highland. So the term for highland or raised land, like a mountain or a hill, is Ka or Kaka in ancient Kemet. In Akan, the term for a hill or raised land is Koko. So Koko in Akan and Kaka in ancient Kemet is the same term. The term for a fertile land is Kwa in Akan. That's one of the terms, Kwa. And of course, Ka is that raised fertile land as well. When you, a flat land or a plain, a flat plain or land is Ta, T-A. But a raised land, a mountain or a hill is Ka or Kaka. That's in ancient Kemet. And then, of course, in the Akan language, the term for a flat land or a plain is also Ta. But then the raised land is Koko, fertile land is Kwa, and so forth. So the land Ka, the raised land of Afura, is the land Ka of Afura, the creator, Afuraka, and the feminine aspect of that is the Ka'et, the raised land of Afurait, a title of Ra'et, the creatress. So the entire book is talking about Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, the land of the creator, land of the creatress, and so forth. In this specific section, we say we have another reference to a divine raised land called Ka. So we went through the cosmology about how Ra moves through matter and Ra'et moves through matter, and when they move through the primordial earth that was covered entirely by water, they caused a portion of the ocean floor to rise up above the surface of the water, breaking through the surface of the water. That became the first raised land. And the first raised land was called Ka and Ka'et. And then Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress, the divine living energy, moved through that first raised land. When they move through matter, they take on the term Afura and titles Afura, Afu meaning flesh, and also house or place of residence. Ra becomes Afura, Ra moving through the matter, moving through the flesh, moving through the house, the flesh, moving through matter, the spirit moving in matter. And once the spirit moves through matter, the spirit is clothed by matter. Flesh and matter is the same thing. So when the spirit of Ra is moving through the primordial earth, then that primordial earth, that landmass becomes the flesh or the house within which the spirit is taking up residence. It becomes the Afu, the flesh of Ra. So he is called Afra or Afura. And of course, Ra'et is called Afurait. So when they're moving through the Ka, they're called Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, the land, Ka, Ka'et, of Afura and Afurait. So we go through all of that information in detail in the entire book. But in this specific section, we talk about another reference because we were talking about the cosmology earlier in the first part 1 and part 2. Once we get to part 3 of the book, we're talking about even more detailed information. We were talking about Ptah, the fashioner of the original land, and then we talk about this section. So we say we have another reference to a divine raised land called Ka. The story in the text is about a sailor from Kemet whose ship was destroyed in a storm. This is the first story, literary composition, talking about a shipwrecked sailor, which all the other stories you find in European literature and plays and everything else of a shipwrecked sailor copying off of this ancient story. The other crew members died in the sea, but the sailor was cast on an island by a wave of the sea. Once marooned on this island, this land, the sailor said, quote, in the text, in the papyrus text, I found fig and grapes there. Leeks were ruler there. Sycamore figs were there together with notched sycamore figs. Cucumbers were there as though cultivated. Fish were there together with birds. There was nothing that was not in it. Then I satisfied myself and I placed some of it on the ground because it was too much upon my hand. I took a fire drill and made fire and made a sacrifice to the Ntoru, the gods, the goddesses, the divinity. So he shipwrecked on an island, but this island was like a paradise. All fruits and vegetables and everything you could imagine was there. It was so much that he filled up his hands and still had too much. So he made a fire and he gave an offering to the divinity, to the Abosom, the Orisha, the Voodoo, and so forth. Then I heard the voice of a storm. I thought it was a wave of the sea. The trees shook and the earth was moved. I uncovered my face and I saw that a serpent drew near. He was 30 cubits long, beard greater than 2 cubits. His body was as overlaid with gold, and his eyebrows were of a true lapis lazuli. He coiled himself and raised up before me. Then he opened his mouth, and he said to me, What has brought you, little one? Then he took me in his mouth and carried me to his resting place and put me down without any hurt. I was whole and sound, and nothing was gone from me. And he said, What has brought you, little one? What has brought you to this isle which is in the sea, and of which the shores are in the midst of the waves? The sailor told the great serpent about the shipwreck. The great serpent told him, Fear not, little one, and make not your face sad. If you have come to me, it is the Ntoro, the God, the deity, who has let you live. For it is he who has brought you to this Nka, or Apunka, the island, the land of the Ka, where nothing is lacking and which is filled with all good things. The great serpent then told the sailor that this land was occupied with 75 serpents, his family, and that the sailor would ultimately be returned home after 4 months to see his loved ones once again. The great serpent told the sailor during their discourse that he was the Lord of Punt. Punt is the region of today's Somalia and other parts of Ethiopia, which includes Eritrea and so forth back then, before they were separate. In ancient times, this land south of Kemet was called Ta Aku, the land of the spirits of the honorable ancestresses and ancestors. Now, for the purposes of this discussion, as we say in the book, it is important to note that the land raised up from underneath the sea, as the serpent called it, an isle, was called the island of the Ka. In the Medutu, the term for island is the symbol, which is a body of land surrounded by a body of water. It's written and vocalized as Oh. And then you have Oh, which is the island. You have the Pong, this, of, and Ka. So Oh in Ka, or Oh Punin Ka, is the island, this of the Ka, or this island of Ka. It is important to recognize also that the major representation of Ra and Ra'et in Knesset and Kemet is the circular serpent, tail in its mouth. there is a major text which is called the Litany of Ra, or the 75 Praises of Ra, found in the tombs of the 19th and 20th dynasties at Ta'apet, so-called Thebes. They describe the 75 forms of Ra. We thus have a raised land called Ka, upon which 75 serpents reside, led by one called the Lord of Ta'aku, Lord of the land of the Ancestresses and Ancestors. This is a reference to Ra as the owner of a raised land, Ka, of origins. Some writers have associated this text with the origins of the tale of Atlantis because of everything that was taking place in this text. And then, of course, when you look at the text in so-called India, they're talking about, the origin of a primordial land raising up and all of that. This is where you get that information from as well. Now, here's the key. We should also take note that in ancient America, the term Ka or Ika in the language of the Inca of Peru means raised land, mountain, high land. The term Amaru means plumed or feathered serpent. The ancient title Amaru Ka means the land Ka of the plumed serpent, Amaru. Amaru is a rainbow serpent who is the creator of the world. This was borrowed by the migrants from Asia who settled in America, who now erroneously call themselves, quote-unquote, Native Americans of Peru. All over Afuraitkaitnut, the serpent with its tail and its mouth is the symbol of the creator and creatress, and very often associated with the rainbow. This rainbow serpent can be found in the Fon and Eves Vodun as Da and Aida Huedo. Of course, in Haiti is Dambala Huedo and Aida Huedo. In Yoruba, in the Ifa Orisha tradition, Oshumare and Odumare. Oshumare is the rainbow serpent that swallows its tail, feminine serpent, and of course, Odumare or Lodumare is manifest as a serpent as well, and sometimes you will see a twin serpent that is Odumare and Oshumare, or Edumare, Eshumare, and so forth. In Akan, you have Nyonkompon and Nyonkonton. Nyonkompon is Ra, the creator, the circular serpent. Pon means great. Pon also means circular. Nanka means serpent. Nankapon or Nyankapon. Nyonkompon is the great pon, circular pon. Nanka, serpent. And the Nyonkonton is the arched tone, Nanka, serpent. We're talking about the rainbow serpent, arched serpent, creator and creatress of the world, representing the collective ancestry of all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. That is true of Nyonkompon and Nyonkonton and Akan, of Da and Aida Huedo and Vodun, of Oshumare and Odumare, and in the Yoruba tradition. Now, the Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, who migrated to ancient Amaruka, America, building pyramids and mounds all over the North, Central, and South American continent, of course, brought their religion with them. In Kemet, the male name of the supreme being is Amen. The female name is Amenet. Amen is often called Amen Ra, while Amenet is often called Amenet Raat. What distinguishes Amen in the iconography of Knesset, Nubia, and Kemet are the two tall plumes or feathers rising up from his crown. And we show two images of Amen, showing his plumed crown. So you see those two tall feathers shooting up from his crown, shooting up into the heavens. So we show a picture of Amen and Amenet, so you can see those two. And of course, Amen and Amenet is Nyame and Nyamewa, in Akan, the great father and the great mother. Of course, Ra and Ra'at, the creator and creatress, are grandchildren of Amen and Amenet, the supreme being. Now, Amen Ra can thus be called the plumed or feathered, with his feathers, serpent, Ra with his tail in his mouth. This is the origin of Amaru, the plumed serpent. Amen Ra is Amaru. Moreover, the term for west in Kemet is also Ament, The extreme west of Kemet is the Western Hemisphere. Ra, through the Aten, the sun rises in the east, the Aptet, and sets in the west. Amen. Amet, or Amen, Ra, Ka, Amaraka, America, Amaruka is the land Ka of Ame, Ra, the western Amet, plumed, feathered serpent. The bearded serpent in the text, when you talk about the bearded serpent, is related to the plumed or feathered bearded serpent of the western quote-unquote paradise. We should take note that the scribe who penned the tale of the shipwrecked sailor in Kemet over 4,000 years ago was named Amini. So, and when we're talking about this information, of course, there are many texts have been written. People have made these comparisons between the ancestral religion of ancient Kemet and that of the Western Hemisphere. Of course, it has been found when you look at they came before Columbus by Van Sertima, or if you look at the first Americans were Africans, more recently published book a few years ago by Dr. David Imhotep, giving even more information, additional information on top of the information that came from Van Sertima, proving that our people were in the Western Hemisphere tens of thousands of years ago before any other group of people existed on Earth. The pyramid builders in the Western Hemisphere, of course, that technology was brought directly from ancient Kemet. We were building pyramids in Kemet and Kani. So we brought that culture here. There was not a group of Asians sitting around just decided to dream up some pyramids over here at the same time that our people were building them over there. So we not only have found genetically, archaeologically with regard to skulls and so forth, the genetic information, as well as the anthropological information, the names of the deities, the nature of the divinities, their functions, their iconography, and so forth. It mirrors ancient Kemet. This is why you have a book called Ramesu or Ramses III, Father of Ancient America, where they're proving and showing that the information is the same information, proving that we migrated to these regions, visited these regions, and set up civilization in these regions. So when you look, for example, at the term Aten or Atenit, which is the sun, you see Nti or Nti in Peru amongst the Inca people. That's the name for the deity of the sun. When you see Amaru, the plumed serpent, the creative power and so forth, you have Amenru or Amaru. This is talking about Amen Ra. What's important is, as we say, of course, just as people who visited or lived in Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, or Africa named themselves after or were named after the continent, Leo Africanus, Scipio Africanus, Terence, Afur, and so forth, so did the Achiwadiefo, the spirits of disorder, whites and offspring, engage in the same process, but for malicious reasons. Amaruka is an ancient name for the continent, learned by the Inca of ancient Peru from the original Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, who built civilization here. The whites named themselves after the continent after having learned of the name when they arrived here a few centuries ago to plunder the land. This is the origin of the Caucasian giving himself the name Amerigo Vespucci. America was not named after Amerigo Vespucci. He gave himself that name, saying Americo, after having arrived here and learning of that name from the people who are already here. Amaraka or Amaruka is the root of Amerigo. Finally, the word for lion in Kemet is Ru. When Ra takes the form of a lion in certain aspects of the cosmology, he is called Ru, Ra, or Ru. So when we say Amaru Ka, Amaraka, Amira Ka, Amaruka, these are all related. So this lion, you see the two lions, the Akeru lion, dealing with the rising sun and the setting sun. And they're called he of yesterday and he of tomorrow. And you see the two lions back to back, ancestral divinity, in the land of the west, in the land of the setting sun. And in fact, we can pull up some information real quick. We're going to do that real quick. Akeru lions, A-K-E-R-U, in ancient Kemet. You'll see them in the in Peru, so-called Book of the Coming Forth by Day, so-called Book of the Dead and so forth. and you'll see those two lines back to back. In fact, you'll also see one of our vendors, the image that they use for their, which you will see in the journal, you'll see those two lines back to back. So, when you look at the information for that divinity very quickly, Aker, Akeru, an ancient Egyptian earth divinity, deification of the horizon, but it's not just the deification of the horizon, but the spiritual forces that animate that region. This particular line divinity governs the eastern and western borders of the spirit realm, protected Ra when he first entered the quote-unquote netherworld, spirit world at sunset. And again, when he returned to the world of the living at sunrise and bore the sun on his back through the spirit realm. He also welcomed the deceased king, the Per'a, into the spirit realm. He defended the sun divinity from the serpent Apep and was considered to be able to neutralize the snake bite in his role as a protective divinity. Twin lion statues representing Aker, Akeru, two lion divinities, were placed at the doors of palaces and tombs to protect against evil spirits, a practice adopted later on, of course, by the Greeks and the Romans. Aker in his plural form, Akeru, was aggressive, very ancient, old divinities. In the pyramid text, they express the wish that each person will escape the clutches of the earth divinities, and specifically states that the Akeru will not attack the king, meaning that, of course, if you get out of harmony with divine law, then you will be consumed, you will be attacked and so forth. You will feel that pressure, feel that those defensive power, that firepower from the divinities, being repelled by the divinities, rejected by the divinities, and then you're forced into a position where you can't harmonize with the other ancestresses and ancestors who are living in harmony with divine order and living in a peaceful existence in the ancestral realm. You're the type of spirit that will be forced away from that, repelled from that energetically by these fiery spirits, and now you'll be earthbound, hanging around, suffering like a homeless person suffering here physically. You'll be a homeless type spirit because of your own actions, because of your own behavior, because of your own disorder. You make yourself repulsive to the Abosom, repulsive to the Nsamafo, repulsive to other, forces in creation and so forth. So this is what we're talking about with regard to Akeru. So you'll see that divinity. We say that just to show when you're talking about the spirit, the sun going into the quote-unquote underworld, the sun setting, going into the Ament, going into the west, going into the western, the extreme west, and the sun setting, the manifestation of these two lion divinities there guarding and protecting that process and the gateway to the spirit realm. So then we talk about Ra, taking on the form of the lion, Ru. And then we have this Ameru or Amen Ra. So you have Amen Ra, the plumed Amen Ra, serpent, and so forth, operating through the Ka. This is why in the Inca language, Ka means mountain, highland, and so forth. Amaru is the plumed serpent. Amaru Ka is the land Ka of the plumed serpent. That plumed serpent is a manifestation of Amen Ra from ancient Kemet. All of the iconography of it is there. All of the cosmology is there. All the representations are there, of course, and of course linguistically is there as well. Because we brought the culture. The Inca did not come up with Amaru. They did not come up with Ka meaning raised land and so forth. They did not come up with Imti or Ati, meaning the sun, because we were always using Ati or Imti, meaning the sun. In ancient Kemet, they didn't create anything. So we're talking about Amen Ra Ka, the land Ka of the West Ament, the western plumed serpent Ameru or Amen Ra. So when we talk about being in this region, and when we say Akwamu Mayn, Amaruka, Etifimu, the Akwamu Nation in North, Etifi, Amaruka, or America. This is the reason why we say the Akwamu Nation in North America. When we use the proper terminology in the Akan language, we would say Akwamu Mayn, the Akwamu Omayn, the Akwamu Nation, Akwamu Mayn, Amaruka, America, Etifi, North, Mu, within. This is why we use Amaruka, because we're utilizing this specific form dealing with the plumed serpent, the western serpent, the energy found in the west, the land of the setting sun. This is why we utilize the term HOODOO MAYN to represent our people in the Western Hemisphere. Mayn means nation, but Mayn also means the version of Mayn, meaning the land of the West, the land of the setting sun. So Jida means purification. Mayn means nation. Mayn also means land of the setting sun, land of the West. HOODOO MAYN means the purified Jida nation Mayn, the purified Jida people, nation, group, community, Mayn in the West, Mayn, who is the purified nation of people in the West, the extreme West of Afuraitkaitnit, Amarukafo, America. So we have ended up in America, in Amarukafo, Amarukafo. We're in the extreme West, Mayn, or Men, but we are purified nation. We have died and resurrected to our culture, just like Asar dying and then resurrecting once again, and Asaase being forced out of rulership and then resurrecting and reestablishing herself as Knut, as Queen Mother, and Asar and Asaase regaining their roles as King and Queen and so forth. We have died and resurrected to the culture. We are purifying ourselves and returning to our ancestral religious practices through our connection with our direct blood ancestresses and ancestors of our blood circles, of our clans, and our interfacing in this region of Asaase Afua, in Amarukafo, or Amarukafo, the Western Hemisphere, the land of the setting sun. So that's what we deal with when we're talking about. Hold on one second. We want to pull that information back up for you. So this is what we're dealing with when we talk about the purificatory process of reestablishing ancestral religion. So then we get to the rise of Amarukafo people, or African, quote-unquote, Americans, Amarukafo Nanasom, our specific expression of Nanasom, our specific expression of our ancestral religious practice. As we've said in the past, of course, Voodoo in North America, in Louisiana and various parts of the South and North and so forth, comes from the term, Fon and Eve term, Voodoo, which means deity, God or goddess, spirit force in creation, divine spirit force in creation. That is a Fon and Eve term. So when the Fon and Eve people were forced into North America, they continued to use the term Voodoo to refer to their ancestral religious practice. The term Juju is a Yoruba term. And of course, when Yoruba-speaking people were forced into North America during enslavement, they continued to speak, they continued to practice their ancestral religious traditions, and it became popularly known as Juju, which is a Yoruba term, dealing with medicine and dealing with healing and protection and so forth. When we talk about Gris Gris, which is a Bambara term, so the Bambara people of West Afuraitkaitnut living in Mali and other parts, they're forced into North America, the large population in the region of Louisiana, and they say they're practicing Gris Gris and so forth. That's a Bambara language, that's part of their tradition, and the tradition itself became identified with that aspect of the tradition, dealing with medicine, dealing with protection, dealing with spirituality, waging war against the enemy, and gaining spiritual protection through ritual practice. And that became the just catch-all title for the Bambara tradition in general. So they were calling Gris Gris. Of course, in our publication, Hoodoo, we are the first to show proof conclusively that the term hoodoo does not come from the whites and their offspring, which they would like to co-opt, lying about the term coming from Judio or Hoodoo or coming from some Irish term, which is idiotic. It comes directly from the Akan tradition. Akan people were forced into North America during the enslavement era. We continued our ancestral religious practice under the term of hoodoo. Hoodoo comes from undu, which means root work, root medicine. It also means conjure. And this is why we say hoodoo means root work, root medicine, but it also means conjure. And that's what we refer to it as in English. But the term we use from our language is hoodoo, the same term we've been using for thousands of years. And of course, in our book, Hoodoo People, we show that the term goes back to ancient Kanat, Nubia, actually being a name of the place itself, the Undu land, and the people being the Undu people. And it also means medicine from roots, trees, stalks, and so forth. It also means to conjure spirits and so forth. It also means to place ritual offerings on an altar. So offerings themselves are called the Undu and so forth. And we've read from text talking about specifically when you're giving your offerings to the divinity, reading from these texts in the language of ancient Kemet. the deities will accept your undu, your offerings, when you present them in a harmonious fashion. So we went into detail about that in the publication. We're talking about our expression. Now we've been doing this for hundreds of years. It's not a situation where 60 years ago, 60, 55, 60 years ago, somebody went to the continent, learned about some traditions, came back with some shrines, and started initiating people into different traditions. That's later. We're talking about the traditions that were brought here in our blood circles that were never broken. So we weren't dependent upon going to the continent or going to the Caribbean or going to South America or going anywhere to get our ancestral religious practices. They have been in our blood circles the whole time. Some people have corrupted certain things. Over the past 100 years, when people began to embrace Christianity, they began to infect the culture, trying to bring the Bible into the culture and bring in other nonsense into the culture that's not part of our culture, which is alien to our culture, which is polluting the culture. It's no different than if you're eating fruits and vegetables and eating normal things, and then someone introduces, cocaine and marijuana and so forth, and you start taking that into your system. Just because you foolishly engage in that doesn't mean that's part of your natural culture and your natural being, and that's what you've always done. In the same fashion, some people incorporating the Bible, incorporating Psalms and all this kind of nonsense into hoodoo and trying to claim that that's part of the tradition. It never has been and never will be in any authentic fashion. But we have maintained our ancestral religious traditions because many people didn't incorporate that nonsense. They were never broken. They were never lost. You can't lose a tradition when you can communicate with your Nsamanso. So we developed a specific form of the Akan tradition in the Western Hemisphere. So the form of the Akan tradition, the form of that practice of undu becomes hoodoo, which is Amarukafo Nanasom, ancestral religion in the Western Hemisphere. Juju is the quote-unquote Amarukafo version of the Yoruba tradition, or the quote-unquote African-American Yoruba tradition. Voodoo, whether it's in New Orleans, Louisiana, or different parts of the South and other parts of the country, is a Amarukafo form of Voodoo, the Fon and Ebe culture, a so-called African-American Voodoo. And the same thing with the various other traditions. Same thing with Gris Gris tradition and African-American ancestral religious Bambara expression, or the Gullah-Geechee tradition, African-American ancestral religious Gullah-Geechee expression of ancestral religion. So the Gullah comes from the term Gullah, Geechee coming from the term Geechee or Kitsi, and these are people living around Sierra Leone and Liberia, around that region of the coast. The Gullah people, Kitsi people, living amongst one another, having similar languages and similar ritual practices, and then when they're forced into North America, the Gullah-Geechee people become the Gullah-Geechee people and so forth. They are not named after any pseudo-Native American and all of that other nonsense. So we're developing an expression, a specific expression of ancestral religion. Now, let's get into how this ties in. We're talking about the rise of Amarukafo Nanasom. First and foremost, we talked about previously how you overcome doubt and fear. We talked about that this week in a previous broadcast. We were talking about returning to our ancestral religious practice, talking about UBEN, to rise, the rise of our ancestral religious practices, Amarukafo Nanasom, so-called African-American ancestral religion, our unique expression of ancestral religion, where we're not dependent on running to other people to develop our culture because we have something that's inborn and intrinsic that's been here for hundreds of years. The first thing we do when we're talking about the rise and talking about the purification of our ancestral religious practices is to deal with true historical and spiritual information that is accurate. When we show in the Kukutuntun, the ancestral jurisdiction, that Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Moses, Aaron, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, Buddha, Brahman, Yahweh, Allah, and all these characters are fictional characters who never existed of any race or in any form, and all of their so-called scriptures are nonsensical and have no spiritual power whatsoever because they're just a collection of corrupted fragments from writings from ancient Kemet, and they have no value whatsoever. Once you remove all of that garbage and you return to the purity of your own ancestral religious tradition, aligning yourself with the Supreme Being, the Great Mother, and the Great Father through the agency of the deities that animate creation, and your ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated, who are connected to your blood circle, and are assigned to guide you throughout the course of your life based on your clan, identity, and affiliation. Once we align ourselves back with that pure culture, in the context of operating that pure culture, authentic expression in the Western Hemisphere, in this region of Asaase Afua, then we manifest naturally our Amarukafo Nanasom, our ancestral religious practice rooted in the Western Hemisphere. This is where we come to when we're talking about HOODOO MAYN. We talked about our event coming up this Saturday, this minute, October 17th, Hoodoo Nation Festival. And once again, for the people who came in a little bit later, this is a free event from 12 p.m. to 7 p.m., Washington, D.C. We will have our EGUA marketplace, a number of vendors selling all kinds of handmade products, natural products, hair and body products, soap, shea butter, cocoa butter, natural jewelry, clothing, live food, artwork, books, a number of different things, roots and herbs and so forth. But then, of course, we will be doing presentations. We have 3 presentations, at least 3 presentations, the major presentations that are scheduled, but we may have another guest speaker as well. We will be doing a presentation on Hoodoo people, the icon ancestral religion in North America. We will have Kamal Makasi Tuhuti, and he will be presenting on his book, How to Make a Negro Christian, where he shows how the whites in our spring methodically and meticulously crafted a strategy to brainwash our people with Christianity during the 12,800s, the so-called 1800s, as a way to make us more docile slaves, because we had been rising up, waging war against the whites in our spring and killing them, freeing ourselves from enslavement. And they saw that the end of enslavement was coming because they couldn't hold on to slavery any longer. So they decided they wanted to mentally enslave our people with Christianity, and he lays that true story out in his publication. Then we will have Asaase Afua, who is the owner of Asaase Hills, and she will be talking about her ancestrally inherited method of extracting the healing properties from plants and minerals and creating the unique tinctures that she has created and used to heal people, our people, of course, from children to adults. And she'll be dealing with that root work, that root medicine coming directly from the ancestral blood circles of our people right here in North America. So when you go to our HOODOO MAYN page, you will see the flyer, the 6-page flyer. You'll see all of the information. And you'll see our newly published book, HOODOO MAYN, Nhoma, the HOODOO MAYN Journal, which, of course, is the official journal for the event. We'll be giving out the softcover version of that journal for free to everybody who attends. We also have the ebook version, the online version, and it is there on the website now. We just published it and released it today. So you can go through that and download it. You will see the itinerary. You see the list of the vendors. You also see other businesses, organizations, and institutions in the ads in the book as well. And then we have articles in the publication that one of them we just completed. And it's talking about the spirit genetic inheritance of our Khan people. And let's get into that real quick before we go to the phone line. If you have a question or a comment on the phone line, of course, hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. And if you're in the chat room and you have a question or a comment, you must log in as a user in the chat room. If you do not have a username, you can sign up for one very quickly in Blog Talk in order to interact. So we're going to pull up the publication real quick, and we're just going to go through the highlights of this specific piece that we published today, or that we released today. One of the articles in the book, we have a few articles in the book, this new book, the HOODOO MAYN, the HOODOO MAYN Journal book. One of them is called Spirit Genetic Icon Ancestral Inheritance and HOODOO MAYN. So we're not going to read through the whole article. You can get it, you can download it in the book. But the key that we deal with, since we're talking about spirit genetic inheritance, we show, of course, the Medutu showing that Undu is a term referencing ancient Nubia, ancient Khanate. We talk about some of the information we've talked about tonight. But then we show some information that is key with regard to corroborative information. We know about our inheritance from ancient Kanat, Nubian, and Kemet directly from our ancestresses and ancestors from those regions. We learn of that directly, of course, from them. Just like you learn about your inheritance from your mother and your father and your grandparents, your direct blood descent. You know who they are. They gave birth to you. You know who they are. They know who you are. If you want to learn about your identity, you go to the source. You go to your direct blood relatives and learn directly from them. And that confirms the reality. That's just reality. It doesn't matter what the whites and offspring lie about, trying to pretend as though we're not descendant or connected to people of ancient Kemet. We don't entertain those clowns. They're direct liars. They know what they're saying is lies. So you don't entertain somebody who's a liar and try to convince a liar they're lying because they're lying. But we know directly from our Nsamanfo who they are, because they would directly tell us, directly, spiritually and otherwise, who they are through spirit possession, communication, and so forth. So we have direct knowledge. Then on top of that, they've left evidence for us in their murals, in their paintings, in their language, in their carvings, and so forth, laying out the cosmology, laying out who we are on the walls of Kemet and the papyri and so forth, laying that out, showing images, full color images of themselves, proper phenotype and everything else, and talking about the various different things that they've done. And then when we look at our culture today, we have the same deities by the same names with the same ritual colors and practices and motifs and so forth. Then when you look at genetic information and archaeological information within genetic information, that simply corroborates what we already know. So it's just additional. It is supplemental. It's not determinative. What's determinative is the fact that it already took place. What determines that you were born of your mother is not some cracker writing a paper about how you were born from your mother. What determines that is the actual event, the reality that took place. Anybody commenting on it later is just commenting on something that already happened. The reality that we're connected and we're direct descendants of the people of ancient Kanat and Kemet is based on the reality that it happened, it took place. We're living beings, we're descendants, we have mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, great-great-grandmothers, and so forth, going all the way back to that time. And we're still connected with them. That's the reality. There's the archaeological information, anthropological information, talking about the culture and the divinities and ancestral spirits and ritual practices and structures of government and so forth. Of course, that's going to corroborate the reality that we're born of these people. But then when you get the genetic information, that further corroborates the reality. It's not determinative, but it is corroborative. So when we look at the DNA analysis shown in the text on page 4 of our newly published book in this particular article, we say the DNA analysis shows Ramesu III of the 20th dynasty has sub-Saharan Afurakani Afuraitkaitnut, or African haplogroup E1B1A, now called EM2. The haplogroup E1B1 now contains two basal branches, EB38, which is E1B1A, and EM215, E1B1B, with B38/V100 joining the two previously separated lineages, EM2, former E1B1A, and EM329, former E1B1C. Each of these two lineages has a peculiar geographic distribution. EM2 is the most common haplogroup in sub-Saharan Afuraitkaitnut Africa, with frequency peaks in western about 80% and central Afuraitkaitnut about 60%. And that's a quote from Trombetta and others, 13,011, the so-called year 2011, a new topology of the human Y chromosome haplogroup E1B1. And they're talking about the lineages of the specific Y chromosome haplogroup. So the Y chromosome is translated or transmitted from father to child going down that Y chromosome line. So when you look at your father's Y chromosome and his father and his father and his father and his father going all the way back, you trace it all the way back. That's the Y chromosomal DNA coming from the father. From the mother, you have the mitochondrial DNA, the DNA you receive from your mother. When you look at her mother and her mother and her mother in a straight line going all the way back hundreds of thousands of years, it's the same, DNA. So there are different branches of the mitochondrial DNA. There are different branches of that Y chromosomal, DNA. and these haplogroups are these different groups. So the E1, B1A, as they designate that particular haplogroup, that Y chromosomal haplogroup, that's the one that Ramesu III had, of course, and he passed it on to his descendants, and therefore you will find, as they say, in Western Afuraitkaitnut, it's the most common haplogroup in sub-Saharan Afuraitkaitnut Africa. It peaks in Western Afuraitkaitnut at over 80%, as well as in Central Afuraitkaitnut about 60%. So, this is what we say in this particular section. After making attempts to float misinformation regarding the DNA of HOODOO MAYN, because at first they put out some misinformation saying he had, Eurasian ancestry, and his Y chromosomal haplogroup was, that of a Eurasian. They put out misinformation, but then proven to be wrong, and they had to begrudgingly put out the accurate information, because not just white people doing these genetic studies, our people are doing these genetic studies as well. Our people here in the Western Hemisphere of North America, as well as geneticists on the continent. So it used to be a time when you had archaeologists and anthropologists and geneticists and so forth. They were all white Egyptologists and so forth, and they were all just saying whatever they wanted to, and then people were trying to pick through the information. Now you have black people who are geneticists, black people who are so-called Egyptologists, chematologists and so forth, black people who are archaeologists, of course, black people who are engaged in so-called anthropology, which is nonsensical. That's like studying the culture from the outside. But when we engage our ancestral culture, we are already engaged in the reality of the process, so we don't have to be an anthropologist. We are living the culture, so we know the culture. But now there are people engaged in these so-called fields of study, fields of endeavor. But then, of course, you have people who are actually involved in the culture. But now the whites and offspring are being forced, when they put this information out, you have other black people who are engaged in the same field, who forced them and forced the real information out. So they begrudgingly had to pull back on this false notion that HOODOO MAYN had Eurasian DNA, and they had to show and forced to show that he had quote-unquote sub-Saharan Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, or African DNA. After they were forced to show that, they had to begrudgingly release the information regarding the DNA of Ramesu III, so-called Ramses III. We show a picture of him. He's dark brown, brother, of course. The Y chromosomal haplogroup identified with E1B1A, so-called M2. This is significant, as we said, because the haplogroup clusters at its greatest frequency in West Afuraitkaitnut at over 80% in many areas, and is also most common in Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut Africans in America, so-called African Americans, about 50 to 75%. This demonstrates our direct genetic link from ancient Khanit and Kemet through West Afuraitkaitnut to America. We show a chart where there's a distribution and the frequency of the distribution of the haplogroup E in Afuraitkaitnut. And when you see the chart, when you see the map of the continent, and you see the distribution and the frequency of that distribution, you'll see that it clusters, as it said in the article, at its greatest extent in West Afuraitkaitnut. When you look around Senegal and Burkina Faso and Ghana and Benin and so forth, you'll see it's even beyond 80%, even higher than that, clusters at its greatest frequency. So when you look at it, it traces a migratory route, and we show that key. And of course, you can't see it right now, but we talk about in the article how the blue portion of the pie chart is distributed, everything. You'll see that graphically in the chart. In West and Central Afuraitkaitnut, it accounts for nearly all of the Y chromosomal DNA observed. Almost everybody in West and Central Afuraitkaitnut have that particular Y chromosome. Now, as you look at the map, you notice that the highest frequency of the haplogroup E in the western part of the continent can trace a migratory pattern, for example, of Akan people from the Senegal region, ancient Ghana and later Mali, which is where Senegal is today, and Mauritania and so forth, through Burkina Faso and to contemporary Ghana and Ivory Coast. So when you look at the distribution of the haplogroup You see it clusters at its greatest extent around Senegal and then into the Mali region, into Burkina Faso, and then down into Ghana and Benin. When you look at that, if you trace a line through that, you'll see that is the exact migratory pattern that our Khan people have been talking about forever of how we got to the western part of the continent. We left ancient Khanat, Nubia, migrated through north and central Africa to the western part of the continent. We established the ancient empire of Ghana in the Senegal, Mali, Mauritania regions, in that large region there. Of course, that morphed into Mali after Ghana fell and so forth. Some of our people left the kingdom or the empire, moved further south towards the Burkina Faso region, moved through that region into northern, what is today's Ivory Coast in Ghana, and then reestablished Akan civilization there. So when you look at that migratory pattern, it traces the exact same pattern as the E1B1A haplogroup. And then when you get from that point to North America, and 50 to 75% of all of our people carry the same genetic marker, you see that the genetic information, of course, comports very well with the archaeological information, the anthropological information, of course, our spirituality, of course, our communication with Yabo Som and Sumaf on them showing this information to us. So we talk about that migratory pattern. We show the chart. What we say at the end portion is this genetic connection is a spirit-genetic connection. As Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut Africans bring our Nsamafo, our ancestresses and ancestors back into the world when we birth children. The spirits that take up residence in the womb are returning Nsamafo. As Akan people were forced into North America, we continue to birth our Akan Nsamafo into the world generation after generation. We would thus continue our ancestral culture in language, ritual practice, moral foundations, cultural structures, and more. Evidence of this reality is abundant among Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut in America who are spirit-genetically Akan. And of course, the same thing is true with other groups. When you bring an ancestor or ancestors back into the world, every time you have a child, you're bringing one of these people who are from one of these groups. And of course, when you came into the world prior to getting into the womb of your mother, when you were an ancestral spirit, prior to that, you were living somewhere on the continent at some point, made your transition, and became an ancestor or an ancestor. But when you return through the womb and you're born and raised in America and so forth, once you learn about ancestral culture, you're going to be naturally drawn to one specific culture more than any other because that's the culture you used to live as a part of. That's the language you used to speak in a previous lifetime. That's kind of ritual you used to practice. So when you hear the drums from that culture, see the iconography from the culture, hear someone speaking the language of the culture, you know that's your culture. So this is what we're talking about. And this is what we're talking about with regard to HOODOO MAYN. So when we bring ancestresses and ancestors back into the world, we're bringing our culture back into the world as well. So therefore, we cannot lose the culture when we're bringing back culture bearers every time we give birth to children. All we need to do is properly cultivate them so they can become receptive and learn that information, regain that information, restore that information within themselves, and the same is true for us. So when we have this HOODOO MAYN festival, this Hoodoo Nation Festival, Hoodoo, of course, we talk about the origin of the term. Mayn means nation, but also meaning the Western Hemisphere. So Akan people in the Western Hemisphere, reestablishing our tradition. And of course, you can find the same amongst the Igbo and Congo and everybody else in the Western Hemisphere, learning to reestablish their traditions in the Gullah-Geechee traditions with Igbo as well as Congo and Yoruba and other groups that were living together in the same region. Congo traditions in so-called New Orleans, Congo Square, and so forth, as well as the various other traditions all around the country, wherever our people are. Reestablishing these traditions, getting rid of the pollution, the corruption of Christianity, Islam, and other nonsense, purging the ancestral religious practices of Hoodoo and Juju and so forth from that nonsense, as well as pseudo-Native American, quote-unquote, spirituality, which is nonsensical, pseudo-European folk magic, which has nothing to do with Hoodoo, even though the crackers would write books and talk about Hoodoo as a mixture of, European folk magic and Native American medicine and all this other nonsense. Hoodoo has nothing to do with them at all. Not at all. It's purely an Akan tradition that was brought here by our people and maintained on the plantations and outside of the plantations where we freed ourselves from the plantation. So it's through that process that we are purifying ourselves, and there's a resurgence of Amarukafo Nanasom, as we would call it, in English African American ancestral religion. As more people establish Nsaman Komre ancestral shrines and communicate directly with their Nsamanfo and reestablish that connection to their ancestral group, who they are, not just taking a DNA test, but learning directly from your Nsamanfo who you are, and beginning to reestablish that culture, reestablish that language within your clans. Now you see that resurgence manifest at a higher level, and that's already taking place. Even for those who have not yet engaged that ritual practice, the resurgence is already there because the Nsamanfo continuously communicate with us on a regular basis. Sometimes we are not paying attention, and they try to guide us in certain directions towards certain behaviors, certain activities, away from certain things. We're not paying attention, but when we begin to be receptive, then we begin to learn directly from them, and they put this information in front of us so we can reestablish our culture, reestablish our civilization, and so forth. The Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in America, in the Western Hemisphere, and in America in particular, we have a contribution to the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit world body on every level, not just politics or religion or economics or, economic activity where they're always trying to bring people from here to say, well, you have the economic wherewithal, you have education and so forth, you can help the continent out. We have those contributions that we can potentially make to the building of Afuraikai, but we also have ancestral religious practice and culture. Some black people think in America we don't have any culture, so we're running around trying to find a culture. Some people are trying to become Hindus or Buddhists or anything else with who they actually are because they've been told that they do not have a culture or told to denigrate or desecrate their own culture. But once we restore ourselves, purify ourselves, we begin to see Hoodoo and Juju and Voodoo and the various traditions for what they actually are direct ancestral, fully formed ancestral religions that still exist intact. And every problem that we need to overcome, every obstacle that we have, a perceived obstacle, can be overcome through the practice of our ancestral religion and through the living of our ancestral culture. This is what the HOODOO MAYN Festival is about, restoring that understanding, building that resurgence of Amarukafo Nanasom, so-called Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African American ancestral religion, showing that manifestation, showing that unique perspective, and building upon that. Once people engage that process in authentic fashion, then we begin to see a resurgence of these practices all over the country. And that will lead to not only the annual HOODOO MAYN Festival, but then expressions, much larger expressions in various groups all around the continent. I'm sorry, on the North American continent we're talking about. So just like they have the Gullah-Geechee tradition festival there in the South Carolina, you have people who will have Voodoo tradition, Juju festivals and so forth. There's going to be a resurgence, and this HOODOO MAYN Festival is a launching pad for that kind of resurgence, specifically of Amarukafo Nanasom, quote-unquote African-American ancestral religion. It's a launching pad for that, but it will spawn other festivals. Once people get grounded in Juju and authentic practice and purge all polluted elements, there will be a Juju festival. Once people purge the negative elements, meaning the pollution, the negative elements of European culture that some people have allowed to creep into New Orleans Voodoo and Louisiana Voodoo and so forth, they purge that foolishness, reestablish the culture properly, and then you'll have Voodoo festivals in North America dealing with reality, dealing with a real expression of Voodoo in our culture in North America. And the same thing will be true with the various forms of ancestral religious practice. So we're going to go to we're going to go to the phone lines, and we're going to get into the chat room, and then we have some of the vendors may call in as well. We want to go through some of the information from the vendors, just so people know when you come to the event who you will be, you look forward to seeing. All of the vendors are listed again in the book, in the publication. So On the phone line, Michiawo, number 2843. You had a question or comment?
Michiawo. This is Ajawai in New Orleans, and I was just calling because I wanted to know if you were aware that there is a Voodoo festival here this month in New Orleans that the Achiwadifo have begun to put on, and of course is a festival of disorder. But I just wanted to know if you were aware of that, and also. It's kind of ironic that they do it in October. In October.
Okay, now which one? Because I've heard of different festivals. Which is there a specific name for that one?
They call it the Voodoo Festival.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they call it the Voodoo Festival. As a matter of fact, I think it started maybe about 10 years or so ago, if it was that long ago.
Yeah. So, and I may have seen it somewhere online, and somewhere. For example, when I looked up online to see if there were any hoodoo festivals in America, I just started Googling to see who was doing something. I assumed that somebody was doing something. And of course, the criminals, the crackers, are going to try to do something. Only one I found was a Hoodoo Heritage Festival in California. They've been doing it for 15 years. And it's run totally by crackers, and of course they have bisexuals and all kinds of nonsense going on.
Yeah.
Totally idiotic, perversion.
And we also have an Ashiwadifo here who call herself a voodoo priestess, a hoodoo priestess. And she charges all of this money, to have folks come, and she gives them a reading, et cetera, et cetera. She has her own store here in one of the parts of the city where there's a lot of gentrification going on, et cetera, et cetera. But it's they take over our culture and they just kind of destroy it. But I just wanted to make note of that since, this has been the subject of the conversations for this month.
No, I may not say, and I'm wondering if I saw there's a movie, a documentary that's online for free. It's called The United States of Hoodoo. And I'm pretty sure the person you were talking about, the cracker you were talking about, the Achiwadifo, the spirit of disorder, who's down there in New Orleans and has a spot and having people come in and so forth. I know he showcased some crackers, which is, the bad part of the movie. He showcased quite a few of them. That's probably the same one you're talking about. But yes, this is, they try to invade the culture, whether it's the Yoruba tradition, whether it's Voodoo. A lot of people have seen how they tried to invade the Yoruba tradition and so forth. But there are two things that are going on. Number one, in reality, they can't invade any tradition because the Abosom, the Orisha, the Voodoo do not communicate with them, never have, and never will. And of course, none of our ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated will ever communicate with the whites and offspring. Neither does the supreme being. So they're not really in a tradition. So these idiots who allow them to stand around them and sing around them and clap around them and participate in rituals, these are still aliens who are not communicating with anything. They're just there. But if a brainwashed Negro allows them to be there and allows them to change their name and pretend like they're part of something, then other brainwashed people will assume that they must be, part of something. This is where the resurgence of ancestral religion from an authentic perspective comes in. When we establish and reinstitutionalize our authentic practice of hoodoo and voodoo in the Yoruba tradition and so forth in North America, as well as on the continent, but specifically speaking to us here, then we begin to stamp out and eradicate these fake practices and these fake individuals, these crackers, of course, but then these Negroes who have allied themselves with the crackers and become enemies of our people, just like the crackers are. So we create a stark contrast, and people have a choice. Do you want to embrace your real tradition, or you want to go along with these parasites? And they can clearly see that. Up until this point, there was no contrast. The only thing that people would see, and if you Google some information, First thing you see is a whole bunch of sites talking about white European folk magic and everything else with Voodoo as well as Hoodoo and everything else. So every time people try to learn something about the culture, they get bombarded with white dissexuals and all kinds of nonsense. Now we are resurging and putting real information out to crush these individuals, eradicate these individuals, and our people have something that really touches who they really are internally, because they knew deep down inside before they even began to search online that there was something they needed to reconnect with. And when they finally come in contact with it, they know that they made it back home. And they are reaffirmed in their experience and their knowledge and their focus that anytime they see one of the white from their offspring anywhere near, whether they're a white Hispanic, a white pseudo-Native American, a white European, white American, whatever it is, Arab, Hindu, Asian, they know that that's perverse, that they know it's insane, has nothing to do with their culture, our culture. They understand when we talk about Maranechi, divine love, law, and divine hate, being the two halves of divine order. They know that's real, and that simply reaffirms what they've always felt throughout the course of their lives, because their own cry was showing them that. So now that we institutionalize these things, people will come out into the forefront. They will begin to share their experiences that they've been having ever since they were children, and begin to share their culture and their experiences with their own children and people around them. This is simply going to cause a rebirth and a resurgence of our ancestral religious practices in North America.
And that is so true. And I guess on some positive notes in reference to these particular people, the good thing is that the hometown people really pay her no mind or no attention. It's usually the tourists who come into the city. And on the other note, I heard you mention Congo Square, and I do want to mention that every Sunday in Congo Square they do have drumming, which I think is wonderful. You know, there's still some culture, even though there's been a lot of gentrification here in the city since Hurricane Katrina. There's still some cultural things going on here in New Orleans.
Okay, that's good. So, and that's something to, of course, to build upon. So once people get, broken through, the firewall against people getting back into the culture is simply the misinformation, including the visuals that the crackers put out. And as soon as our people are confronted with that, even if they were excited at first, they're immediately turned off, and they're like, well, we have nowhere to turn. We don't have anything. We can't have anything. And then they just go back to what they've been doing. But this is why we must institutionalize our unique expression of ancestral religion in North America, reinstitutionalize that resurgence based on firm cosmological foundations and experiential foundations. And that's the catalyst that this HOODOO MAYN, Hoodoo Nation Festival is going to be.
Right, and that's wonderful. And you're right, it's something to build upon, and that's the good thing. So, Madase.
We appreciate the call. Okay. So, just want to look in the chat room right quick, make sure we didn't miss anything there. Okay, so just saw a couple of comments there. And yes, the link. So the HOODOO MAYN link, the question in the chat room, the HOODOO MAYN link is when you go to that page, the HOODOO MAYN journal is on the page, so you can click on that. The cover of the journal, you can download the entire book. And then, of course, you can go to the Nhoma page, the publications page on the website, and we have included that journal on that page as well. So now we have 17 books. That's the 17th book. When you go to the Nhoma page, if you'd like the softcover version of the journal we just published today, that is $8. And then, of course, all our books range between $8 and $11. So that's one way to assist us in the work that we are doing. Of course, the HOODOO MAYN event is free. And all the speakers, of course, what they're doing is free. And then, of course, we have the vendors and everything else. One thing we want to do is mention all of the different vendors who will be at the event. So when you pull up the book, we want to go through that real quick so everybody knows who's who, to give you an idea. So you get to page 18, you'll see the marketplace vendors, the EGUA marketplace vendors. So we have Lovin' My Soaps, which is natural soaps, handmade soaps, shea butter, whipped shea butter, cocoa butter, lotions, clays, and more. Some of the main ingredients for these handmade soaps are hemp oil, coconut oil, soybean oil, shea butter, lye, olive oil, corn oil, essential oil, sea salt, baking soda, and so forth. Their products contain no parabens, no formaldehyde, lauryl sulfate, preservatives, animal, and petroleum. So, Loving My Soaps, natural, handmade product. Then we have Immortal Arts Studios, and of course, Loving My Soaps, LUVIN, lovingmysoaps.vpweb.com. So all that information, of course, is in the journal. Immortal Arts Studios, Brother Ket Heru Tamu, custom handmade talismans and amulets. You'll see it at immortalartsstudios.com. And you'll see the copper work, the precious stones and so forth, all kinds of unique handmade pieces dealing with ancestral culture, ancestral religion, medallions, necklaces, bracelets, all kinds of things. We have Africa's Reascension, of course. Kamal Makesi Tahuti is one of the presenters, but then he's also a Blog Talk Radio host as well for his show Africa's Reascension on Blog Talk Radio. So you'll see the link for that, but then you also see he'll be selling his book, How to Make a Negro Christian, and speaking on that as well. Then we have, on the next page, Asaase Afua Creation. You have Ama's Crafts, which is handcrafted knit and stitch, handcrafted clothing. The Enchanted Pharmacy with amulets, adornments, body care. Then Yawu's Kitchen, nutritious and delicious vegan delight. So you'll see that. That's one of the vendors there. We have Elements for Nature. Elements for Nature is a company. They are the exclusive manufacturers and distributors of George Washington Carver's products. So they have the license to distribute his products, his formulas, and his products. And they have a number of different products, and we are very happy to have them. Of course, we did a broadcast on Nana Kwame Afrane, George Washington Carver, from an Akan perspective, talking about his life, talking about how he was said that he communicated with the spirits of nature to learn how to extract the properties from the plant, mineral life, and so forth to create his formulas and transform agriculture worldwide. So we're glad to have them as a vendor. Nikki Fatu's art, she is an artist, visual artist, graphic artist, and so forth. Unique, deals with cultural pieces. Asaase Hills, of course, as we said, Ama Asaase Ajay, she will be speaking, but her tinctures and so forth, but she also makes a number of different things, African dolls, therapeutic oil fragrances, therapeutic oils, children's T-shirts, authentic black soap, other upliftments and so forth. We have Our Market and Wellness Center out of Philadelphia. They also have the Our Black Comeback Center in Philadelphia. They will have the handmade clothing items from Ghana, jewelry, DVD collector items, incense, powder herbs, shea butter cream, salves, essential oils, scrubs, African artifacts. We have Unique Individuals, Inc., specializing in artwork, murals, business logos, concept sketching, and illustrations, but great artwork from the brother, Phoenix Nebula. Hold on 1 second. We just want to make sure we didn't miss something as we're scrolling through the information. Okay, so then we have Our Black Comeback Center. It's a center, thousands of square feet in Philadelphia. They're doing institution building right there in Philadelphia on 2427 West York Avenue in Philadelphia. Mama K's live and raw foods. So she'll be bringing their raw food. And, of course, Mama K likes to say Yedase to her because she said all of the proceeds from what she sells will be going as a donation towards the building of our Akungwa Suyadai, our ancestral our institution of learning, healing, training, employment, and entrepreneurship. And of course, you can learn about our institution. So all of the books, the publications, the broadcasts, everything that we do, the trainings on substance abuse abstinence, ritual methods for that, overcoming domestic abuse, neutralization, and so forth, overcoming transcarnational suffering, intergenerational trauma, the employment opportunities with regard to independent employment, entrepreneurship. When we allow people, you can become an entrepreneur today. If you're not working, you need funds. You can sell the softcover versions of our books, purchase them wholesale and sell them retail and begin to generate income immediately. That program is run out of our institution. Of course, all the publications that we do, the writing, the editing, the publishing, the printing, we print our own books in color, in-house on our own printers, do the shipping as well. All of that is born of the institution. All of the classes that we have, workshops and everything. So we're working to establish a physical space for the institution in the D.C., Maryland region. So as we're raising funds for that, we have a GoFundMe campaign for that. And of course, Mama K says she would like to donate proceeds from sales of the live food to our, to our institution. So Yedase, we appreciate that. She's one of the vendors, live food vendors. You'll see in the journal also ads from different businesses, organizations, and institutions, most of which who have been on the home economic development aspect of the EGUA Marketplace show. And you'll see, for example, Kamali Academy, homeschooling, and Dr. Iya Ajwa with Hemi Metsu Productions, Cultural Rebirth Connections, Kajara Nia Navidhet, the authoress of Ra Seki, Hermetic Reiki Volumes 1 and 2, and another number of other books. Wabet Ravens Seshat Heru. She's just published 2 new books, Mas Heru, The Birth of an Ancient King, talking about Heru and so forth. She also just published a children's book on Kemetic creation stories and so forth. We have Ma'at Ma'al Keru, the publisher and authoress of What's in Your Womb, talking about natural healing for women. We have Akko Ben House, owned by Mwalimu Baruti and Enaya Baruti out of Atlanta. They have their homeschooling piece, but then they also, of course, publish great books. Mwalimu Baruti publishing a number of different books that everybody should have. We have Akoma Ntuaso, Cultural Tours to Jamaica, and the Book Drive by Mr. Kintake Malopenza. She's been on the show a couple of times. You'll see Tiwan Tiwa, ADP Mayan Village, Ancestral African-Centered Village being established in the Austin, Texas region. We have Aunt Services, that's by Iya Naila Sankofa. We have Aunt Services by Coach Bilal Sankofa. We have Nkingu Health, owned by Dr. Asivi Adiro, who's been on the show a couple of times as well. So all of these different individuals, you see all of this information in the journal. I just want to make sure we scroll through with everybody. I didn't want to miss anything here as we get through them. Give me 1 second. I think it's slowing up for a second. Hold on 1 second. Okay. All right. So, yeah. So, those are the different vendors, and you'll see the information. You'll see the links to the websites and everything. So, there are 4 minutes left in the broadcast. We wanted to make sure that we won't really need to go much longer beyond 11:30. If you want to listen beyond 11:30, the call-in number is 657-383-0635 because it will cut off exactly at 11:30 online. But if you want to listen beyond that, you can jump on the phone line before 11:30. You have about 3 minutes. 657-383-0635. 657-383-0635. Okay. So we're going to take a phone call, and for those who can't stay on beyond 11:30, please, if you get a chance, come out to the event on Memenida this Saturday, October 17th, Washington, D.C. You can also check out the video trailer that we did for the HOODOO MAYN Festival, and we give some good information about the origins of hoodoo, how it was maintained in our blood circles through our ancestresses and ancestors when we were forced into North America, and how it is resurging. So you can watch that trailer, because that trailer is like really in reality a trailer for an upcoming documentary. So you can watch that video. It's like a short film, and so to speak, just a short trailer of a short film, but that will be coming forward this year as well. Of course, our year began September 23rd. That was our New Year's Day, the first day of 13,016 for us in the HOODOO MAYN, Amarukafo the HOODOO Nation in North America. But you can check out that video. We posted it on Facebook. It's also posted on our webpage as well. Check out the journal. If you would like to support the work we are doing, you can purchase the journal. If you can't come out to the event and you would like the softcover version of the book, the new book, that book is $8. Of course, all of our books range between $8 and $11, and if you order 10 books or more, it's automatically 30% off. So, for example, the first 10 books is $66, which is 30% off the normal regular price. So, whether you order one book or more, they only range between $8 and $11. So you can, if you would like to support the work that we're doing, that's the best way to do so. We also accept a donation of $15 or more. We will send you one or more of our books as, to thank you for the donation. Just let us know which book or books you would like to receive. But yes, you can purchase. Now available is the HOODOO MAYN journal, the HOODOO MAYN Nhoma, the HOODOO MAYN journal that we just released today for 13,016, which we were reading from when we were talking about the spirit, genetic, icon, and ancestral inheritance. So, Yedase for tuning in. We're going to take this phone call before we leave. Michiavo on the phone line, number 2081. You had a question or a comment?
Yeah. Well, my question, greetings, Kwesi. The question I like to ask, in regards to our people, they left information in regards to what was in the past, because some of our people might say forget, but their ancestors left things in the walls, paintings, and writings. If those things were not available to our people, either know if or not, when our people still have some form of some ability to still tap in to those type of secret things that was either still left or, like, let's say it's been like completely destroyed. Our people could still in tune to the things that if it's ever like destroyed information, basically. Yeah, that's my question.
What? No, you said, can our people still tune in, still tap in?
No, like,
is that what you're asking?
Let's say the information was never available, but our people, like, left, like, that certain things left in stone, writing, and all types of aspects.
Right.
Imagine if it was never available. Can our people still have a way to recreate, without even knowing of knowledge this?
Right. So, yeah, I understand. So, yes. Yes, as a matter of fact, that's true. So some of our people, what we did in ancient Kemet in different places, we either left things in stone, or other places we, created jewelry or different artifacts, sculptures, different things, adinkra symbols, different things to transfer knowledge intergenerationally. But some of us will find ourselves in positions where we're around individuals, we're around groups, we're around, places where we don't come in contact with that information at all. It's growing up, or it's so rare, or if we come in contact with something, we don't even know what we're looking at. But internally, through our own kra, our own ancestral memory, and then internally, our connection with our ancestresses and ancestors who are assigned to us even before we come to the womb to guide us in our spiritual development, we have a resource there. So we have people, not just any Nsamako, not just any of these relatives, but there are some who are assigned to us specifically to assist us throughout the course of our lives. They are our greatest resource, because when we begin to feel that yearning and that pull, that ancestral mandate to begin looking into who we are, and we don't know why at first, because we've been taught against ancestral communication and all these things, but we have that strong urge, and they're moving us towards that, and our own craft pulling us in that direction. We begin to study whatever we can But once we began to answer that call coming from the Nsamanfo, then they put us in position, because now we're open and we're receptive. So when we're led and pushed to go to a certain place and move in a certain direction, we're put in the position to come in contact with information that confirms what they were telling us internally. That confirmation gives us even more of a motivation to move forward and learn even more. And then they'll put us in position or put us on the right website at the right time, or wherever we are, to gather bits and pieces of information that put those pieces together, in front of us tangibly. Then we start engaging ritual practice directly, and then they begin to share. No matter how receptive we thought we were initially, we begin to open up our receptivity. They communicate with us in dreams. They'll communicate with us during ritual at shrines or wherever else. They communicate in different ways, so once we begin to learn the different ways that they communicate, we start to see, through animal totems as well and so forth, we begin to see that they have been, helping us navigate our way through ever since we adhere to that call. So we can begin to recover this information, reestablish the information, reestablish the culture on firm foundations directly from the people who founded and maintained the culture for thousands of years, even if we hadn't been initially introduced. So yes, we can do that. And we have the responsibility to do that.
Okay, I see. I think an event passed, was it Thursday, Saturday, of the Million Man March? And I think one person told me that at times they went up there and they feel that they got some sense of good feeling of watching black people gather on one accord. No, it was established by, Muslims that, really it's not really what we follow. So the only question I had to ask in regards to, is it really when our people intermingle each other, is it really just a good feeling thing, or is trying to search? Because the person that told me that participated in that Million Man March, he said that it's only a good feeling, but it's not really something that is accomplished, like really what our people should be doing moving forward. I'm not sure I'm clear with the question.
Right. Now, some people will go to things like that just because they want to feel like something is happening, and being around a bunch of people, that's not something they do on a regular basis or have experienced on a regular basis, so that's a good feeling to them. Of course, they did that 20 years ago. They got together, and there was, a couple of million people out there, and they had a good feel. And back then, there was a call like, all this nonsense about America's under divine judgment and God's going to come out of a spaceship, Master Farad Muhammad, and going to drop, bombs on America. America doesn't repent and all this other nonsense. There was a sense of urgency then with all those couple of million people out there, and they were feeling good. And 20 years later, you're going to come back and say, well, America, you're under divine judgment, or else. So you got a window of opportunity before God comes with the spaceship to drop. I mean, that's all nonsensical. So people who are, consciously aware, they will recognize that's nonsensical. We don't just go for something that, quote unquote, on the surface feels good. That's no different than somebody drinking some orange drink, like some Sunny Delight, some orange drink. If it's hot outside and you feel, you've lost a lot of water, you're kind of dehydrated, and somebody has some cold orange drink, then that seems to satisfy your thirst, different than not having anything to drink, and it is cool, and then it's sweet, and it seems to give you a little bit of energy. So you go from having nothing and being thirsty and hot and sweating to being cool and, filled up and also feeling some energy. But then you find out that the orange drink is not really orange juice or apple juice or whatever. It's just drink. It's just sugar with coloring. So the energy you got was more like a drug high, but it wasn't something that was beneficial for your body. And you really didn't even satisfy the body's need for rehydration with pure water. You've actually polluted yourself, drugged yourself. It seemed like it was all right in the beginning. It made you feel good, but in reality, at the end of the day, you were worse off before you even drank the Sunny Delight. You could have just waited and found something or somebody or somewhere that had some actual water or some organic juice and drank that. So some of our people will go along with the sunny delight. Some of our people will say, I don't want that. I want some real organic juice. I want something real that's going to cleanse or purify me so I can engage in some real activity that's intelligent and not be standing around behind a bulletproof glass like a mime talking about God is about to come destroy America, so you better listen to me or else. You can't say or else for 20 years. You can't say or else for more than 20 seconds. If somebody punches you and you say you better look out or else, after about 20 seconds, if you don't do anything, then people are going to assume you're never going to do anything. After 20 minutes, they're really going to tell you seem like you're not going to do anything. If 20 days goes by and say, if you punch me again or else, it's going to be a problem. If 20 months goes by, they're like, nigga, please. 20 years, you're out of your mind if you say or else, and you've been saying or else for 20 years. So, some of our people understand that, and they didn't entertain that nonsense, and that's why you see all the dissexual, homosexuals, faggots, the crackers, all kinds of nonsense going on out there under the guise of, we're coming together. Who are they coming together with? So it's all nonsense. But the people who know better, they did better. The people who didn't know any better, they went out there, they saw a great deal of nonsense, and they were deflated coming back. They were not energized. They could look for, a diamond in the rough, like, well, I did connect with somebody, but that's not the key. I mean, if you're going to get some food and there's a bunch of, elephant droppings all around an apple, and you say, well, I do see an apple in the midst of all of that excrement, you're not going to walk away feeling good about that because you've got an apple out of the excrement, but you carried a bunch of excrement home with you as well. I mean, that's not something, that you want to reach in and grab and say, well, I found what I needed. In reality, you want to go somewhere and get some real food and get fed off of it and not have to sit amongst the excrement and think that you've extracted something. Because even the thing that you extracted probably is polluted as well, even though you think you got something good from it.
All right. And the Hoodoo Festival with all the people and the products is on the page, Facebook page. I was wondering if they have like a... it's in the book. Oh, okay. I was wondering if they have the product.
Today, and we included all of the vendors as well as some other businesses and so forth who place ads in the book. All of them are in the book, so you can download the whole thing and see all of them.
Okay. All right. Madase, thanks for answering my questions.
Okay. Yini, appreciate the call. Okay. So it looks like we have one more call on the phone line. On the phone line number 0212, you had a question or a comment?
Hetep, Machiawo, Brother Quasi.
That's up.
Hetep, this brother Kep. I'll be one of the vendors at the festival on Saturday. To say I'm excited.
Oh yeah, what's up?
It would be an understatement to say I'm excited, brother. First would like to give thanks to the great mother, the great father, Amenet, Amen. The cultivated ancestors. Just a beautiful thing. You went over some information earlier in the show about Amaruka, right? And
right.
Something that came to me was that there was also a feminine to Amaruka. And I was looking in the name of Afuraka as the masculine, and I said, well, how about Amarukafo? Where did that come from? Has that ever came into your rostrum before?
Right. So, as a matter of fact, so when you look at the term, by the time it gets to the Inca people and the way they pronounce it and focus on it and everything, you'll find that Amaru is the way that they utilize it. But this is why we're saying that Amaru is coming from Ame-Ru as well as Amen-Ra. And of course, when you look at Amen-Ra, that's a title of Amen, Amen-Ra. And of course, you get Amen-Ra-Ka and so forth. But then in ancient Kemet, you'll find that a title of Amenet is Amenet Raet. And that can be found, somebody can look at, you can look in a hieroglyphic dictionary and see Amenet Raet and so forth. So there's always been that balance as well. And the thing we do is, of course, we focus and just make sure we point that out. So even if somebody, for example, looks at, for example, for years people would always talk about Amen all the time, Amen and Amen Ra, and they would hardly mention Raet at all, not because she doesn't exist or not because Amenet doesn't exist, but because black people were following white Egyptologists, and that's what they do. And even now, they'll create organizations called the Temple of Amen or something, Amen, 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 and they'll never focus on Amenet or Raet at all, and she doesn't even feature as though she's just some abstract principle that doesn't even exist. I'm just showing that they're really not dealing with these dead. So we make sure to, bring that focus on them, but that focus is just pointing out the reality that they exist. So you have Amen Ra, of course you have Amenet Raet, and they already exist. So when you get over to whether it's America or anywhere, whites and their offspring start taking things over, they're always just going to focus on the masculine aspect. That's it. So of course it's up to us to bring that focus back.
Right. And I'm saying within the name Amaruka, right? Just like Afuraka. Would the Amu could be considered flesh just like Afu? And could you possibly say the name Amarukayet, Amarukayet, like that? Just like how you would say Amaruka.
Well, the Ama is really just Amen or Amenet.
Okay.
And then Ra is, of course, is Ra, and then it would be Raet. The Ru, one of the titles of Ra is also Ru, as a lion. The title for a lion is Ru, because, of course, that sound they make, roar, it's a roaring sound, but when you see the lion divinity, it'll say Ru. In ancient Kemetic, you see the couchant lion as Ru. And, of course, the feminine version of that would be Rut, R-U-T. And it's really, you're saying Ru, and then you're cutting it off. So you say Ru for the male and then Rut for the female. And that T is really concretizing because you're cutting off the flow of air, whether it's Amen and Amenet. Once you cut it off, just like the womb stops that expansion, it collapses around the sperm cell so you can have an actual conception. So it's cutting off the air supply to make that thing a thing, to make it concretized and make it an entity. So whether you say Ka and Kat or Ra and Rat or Raet, it's the cutting off. So it's Ru and Rut, Ka and Kat, Amen, Amenet. So that's what it's dealing with.
I say, and see, this just confirms that it's coming through the moja, through the blood, because even within the works that I do, thankful that you reached out and can see and recognize. That's what it is. It's a remembering. It's a recognition. It's like no one could teach you something. It's like a remembering, if you understand what I'm saying. So when you see it, you recognize it, and you know, okay, that's no quarry right there, because it feels it, and it's not no, like you said, no drug sensation like you drank some Sunny Delight. No, it's the actual, you're eating the actual orange, and you can get the information, the minerals, and that's transferred, and that is all you get possessed by the Abaso.
Exactly. And that's key. It's our responsibility. So it's not a thing of, what was happening and we'll talk about this in another broadcast, but what's happening, for example, in D.C. this past weekend was really the bookend to the death blow to black messianic nationalism. So this messianic nationalism has been going on for nearly 100 years. Of course, from the gate, it's always going to be ineffective. This whole notion of the Messiah coming to save the world and the one man coming and all this other nonsense, and people have various, intimations of that, various perturbations in reality or permutations of that nonsense, and you see it all over the place the Black Messianic nationalists. It's never worked. It never will work. It's not possible of working or leading us to anything. That's why the Whites and Offspring infused us with that knowledge of the Messiah and, Messianic nationalism, so that we would always be stuck trying to follow that model and trying to gain some mileage out of the model that was created by the Whites and Offspring to actually keep us stuck in the same position. So what happened this weekend was the bookend and the death blow to that Black Messianic nationalism that has been going on for, over 100 years, that has been totally ineffective, and people have finally got their fill of that, and they see it's totally ineffective, and there's no longer an argument about that. You can't go any further and try to make any kind of excuses. Even their own followers are beginning to see, like, wait a minute, this is really not working for our people. You know what I'm saying? So, and some people will try to bring that Messianic nationalism into ancestral religion and turn it into just another form of Christianity, Islam, and, a divine, teacher and leader, and God's leading the flock to the Orisha, leading them to the Abosom and stuff. So that doesn't work either. What it's talking about is, as you were saying, something internal coming from your own cra, your own soul, your divine consciousness, and the Abosom that were assigned to you, your own ancestresses and ancestors, and then you align yourself, and then you collaborate with other individuals who are doing the same thing, because they have the capacity and they have the responsibility to align with that divine function that they should be, executing in the world, and the divinities that govern their head. So once our people know that every single Black person comes into the world with a divinity that governs their head, there's no such thing as a Messianic national. So we can't even fall into that nonsense. So, yes, it's internal, and then we, connect with others who are engaged in the same process.
Indeed. Medasek.
Yeah, I'll say that. And we look forward to connecting on Minida on Saturday.
Indeed.
Okay, that's it.
I bet you. Yeah.
Okay, so that was the last call on the phone line. So we're going to end it here. So, I'll say we thank you once again for tuning in. We look forward to connecting with you on Minida this Saturday, October 17th, for the HOODOO MAYN Hoodoo Nation Festival in Washington, D.C. Go to our HOODOO MAYN page on our website, ojirafo.com. Please continue to share the information, share the event notification on Facebook. We'd like to get as many people to come out to the festival, to shop with the vendors, as well as come to the presentation, come to the libation as well, see the ancestral shrine, see the the Hoodoo Akuaba that we have acquired and restored back to our ancestral clan and so forth, our people here in the Western Hemisphere. We talk about that in the book. That's one of the articles in the book, talking about the Akuaba doll that was found in Virginia nearly 300 years ago, that we have reclaimed and we're able to reconnect with and take back from the crackers, and it's going to be on the ancestral shrine. So, Yedase, we thank you for tuning in, and Yebeshia Bia, we will meet again. That's it.